I love books. I mean, I always have. Since I was a little kid, books have always been, well, don't tell my wife, but my best friends. No, I love books of all kinds. And I also moved around a lot when I was a kid. So I kind of don't have much of anything from my childhood, but I do have some of my books. And when I think about the art that I like to make now, so much of it, I think, is embedded somewhere in those books, those very early things that excited and inspired me. So what I thought might be fun is to take some of those books and just share them with you. Maybe you've seen some of them too. Maybe they were books that meant something to you, which I would love to hear about. And maybe there are other books that meant something to you that I didn't include. But these books are, in many cases, the original books that I've owned for my entire life. And they're just really precious to me. And I'm going to take you through them and tell you perhaps what I think about why they matter to me still, what I remember about them. Okay? So pull up a chair, relax, and let's talk about my favorite books. I'm going to show you these in no particular order, but these are 3 books that were originally 4 that are part of what's called the Nutshell Library. And they were written and illustrated by Maurice Sendak. Maurice Sendak was, probably best known for Where the Wild Things Are, but he always has kind of a wicked sense of humor. And, I love his little drawings. I just love the little size of these books, As a little kid, having a set like this is just so great. This one, those alligators, his stuff is, particularly in these books, it's very simple. It's kind of cartoony, but they're also just really nicely well-drawn things, too. This one, Chicken Soup with Rice. Look at how detailed they are, too, though. Despite how small they are, look at the beautiful hatching. Just all the details of the way that tree is drawn, those leaves. It's funny, I just look at these books and I see stuff, and they're just full of memories and good feelings. The 4th book was about a boy who didn't care. And he just told his parents that he didn't care what they did, and he didn't care if he ate food, and he didn't care. All he would say is, "I don't care." And then, like, some animal came and offered to eat him, and he said, "Do you want me to eat you?" And he says, "I don't care." So I don't care. The 4th book, as I said, has been missing for a long time, but I remember that being the most kind of punk rock in a way of these books. Maurice Sendak, really super influential to so many people. This is a book, I think it was my mother's originally. It's called Love, illustrated and designed by Vani. And this is a book, as I said, it belonged to my mother, but I used to borrow it and steal it all the time. And what was so great about this book was that it had these cutouts. And it's the story of this girl whose parents are just horrible. They're really mean, and they leave her alone. And so and it says this basically, like, she was kind of an unattractive girl who nobody cared about, and but the story is, again, a little grim. A lot of the stories I seem to like were kind of grim stories, but this design of this book with these cutouts and how the story would be told through these. And also how simple these drawings are. They're basically just like probably drawn with a dip pen or a brush, and they're just very simple. Great colors as well. Really, and it's a good story. And this one, I just remember this so much, like how this whole story is told almost like a little movie that you go through the different scenes. And so he was Greek, I guess, originally. Gian Bertovani. love. So this book is called Hans and Peter, and I think it's a Dutch book originally. But this, I did not steal it from the library, but I didn't have this book. I had it when I was little. I lost it, and then when I was an adult, I went out and I got a copy of it and replaced it. So this book is about these two boys, and they find this old building, and they basically restore it. Like, they don't like the house that they live in. One boy lives upstairs, this boy lives down below the ground, and they really are unhappy. And they have fantasies about the house that they're going to find. And then one day they find this little shack. It's all drawn with pastels, I think, or some kind of crayon. So they're almost like kids' drawings in a way. Nice little drawings there. And they find this house and they decide to clean it. And then they buy some paint. And they fix the stove, but smoke gets everywhere. These are just like little pencil drawings in here too. And they paper it with newspaper. That's what this is, newspaper. And they find a bunch of furniture, and they build a table. And anyway, so these drawings just stuck in my mind. I always remember these drawings, and I just remember the story of these boys who have their own house. They make their own little clubhouse. It just, I was just crazy about that. I don't know what it was, but, and so I got a copy of this book, and at first I thought, well, I guess, this is many years later. I got a copy I found on the internet, and I thought, is it going to be terrible? But it wasn't. It was just as good as I remembered. Yeah, so Moomintroll. There were lots of different Moomintroll books, but I just love them, and I always remember these drawings. Like, I mean, look at how beautiful that is. They're so atmospheric, even though they're so simple, but so sweet and strange. With these moomins, they're like little hippos, but they're sort of like different species that all kind of live together. And the stories are just really sweet. And again, these drawings are they're very simple, very confident lines, and just gorgeous. Spot illustrations. I have that one. I also have this one, Finn Family Moomintroll. They're just, I don't know. I mean, they're these weird characters. They kind of never explain, like, why are these creatures? Like, what is this thing that's like an aardvark? And when you're a little kid, you think a lot about these things when you look at a book, right? You think, like, you kind of make up stuff to rationalize it and to explain it. So, and then these kinds of beautiful landscapes, there would be like unnecessarily good drawings. So, just, I really love those Moomintroll. Oh, this is another one, Phantom Tollbooth, illustrated by Jules Pfeiffer. This is another book. It was about this, this weird kid, and then he gets this car that he can drive, and he drives through, and he gets a toll booth for some reason. Somebody gives him a toll booth as a present, and and so much of this book is about language and puns and strange like constructions, and this is the humbug, and again, the quality of these drawings that these drawings are so great, so one of a kind, so recognizable. He was a kind of a Village Voice cartoonist, and I think Jules Pfeiffer just died quite recently. But in the '60s, he was such a phenomenon. I think they were like, he wrote movies, and they did shows about his drawings, and a Broadway show and stuff, all kinds of things. His drawings are like pretty crude, really, in a way. They're just like, they're almost doodly in a way. But and the hatching, you see how loose it is? It's not. But this story and those illustrations together in my mind, there's so many parts parts of this book that are so incredible that I read it first when I was probably 8, 9, 10, that age, and I didn't understand huge chunks of it, but I've reread it multiple times since then, and it really stuck with me and resonated with me still. This is another love book. It's a different kind of book by Joan Walsh England. And these strange drawings. This, I think, again, was a book I stole from my mother, I have a feeling. I don't really know why, because it's not the kind of sentimental thing that my mother would like, but I just love these. And all these, the way that she would always do these drawings of people, these little, everybody was like a little boy or a girl with no features except for these two wide-spaced eyes. But then there was still these very detailed, beautiful hatching and very simple drawings, stylized, very limited palette. And this, I think, stuck with me a lot too, this idea of doing like 2 colors. And this whole book is kind of like that. But these stories have, it's again, unnecessarily good drawings, so much detail in them. Look at that wind, those clouds. And yeah, it's 2 colors. Is it 3 maybe? Is it blue? No, I think it's green ink and red ink. I'm not sure exactly. But lots of different shades of it. Looks like they're watercolored. But a very sweet book as well. Very beautiful kind of story of love and all the different ways that we interpret it. So I'm sure you know these books, Winnie the Pooh and The House at Pooh Corner, illustrated by Ernest Shepard, or with decorations by Ernest Shepard. But I don't know. I quite like the Disney movie, the Disney cartoon, but Winnie the Pooh will always be these drawings by Ernest Shepard. And I don't know, this book with the map at the beginning, drawn by me and Mr. Shepard helped. Again, with this incredible hatching and just the kind of majesty of that tree. And these things are so simple. They are kind of decorations, I guess. They are sort of little pieces of drawings. And then, of course, this is the sequel, The House at Pooh Corner, where we see all the characters and their signatures here at the bottom. And the silhouette. And these things, like, they stick with me and haunt me and make me want to do things like this and to be as confident and simple and sweet and iconic. And much as I loved Winnie the Pooh, I love this book probably even more. And this is The Wind in the Willows, also illustrated by Ernest Shepard. And again, with a map at the beginning. And that drawing, I think that's like one of those powerful drawings I ever saw when I was little. Just the feeling of that exuberant mole leaping in the air. It's how beautiful those trees are, all that grass. And then these colored illustrations, a few of them. It's a thing I also remember so much as a kid, that there would be an illustration like this that was so beautiful and dense, and then it would have a line from the book, "Ratty, please, I want to row." And sometimes it would be appropriate to where it was in the book, you know, but a lot of times it would just be a random thing, and sometimes it would be like 50 pages before that actually happened that there was this illustration. And a lot of times, of course, it didn't have anything printed on the back because they had to drop it in. This is another drawing I remember so vividly. These 3 friends sitting around the fire, contented with these, like, I don't know what they are, hams or something like that, hanging above them. Yeah, here's another one. "Rat, you're a wonder." But I don't know where in the book that comes from. But yes, this is when they find the sign to Badger's house. So I guess it is actually around that sign, that moment. So, look at that drawing that goes across the page. So beautiful. That's better. Now I'm littler, so you can see less of my old mug, and you can see some more of these pages. Look at how detailed this is. Can you see? So evocative. You know, you read these books and you remember the parts of the story, and then you look at the pictures again. That thing about, I just remember when my son was little, and he would always say, like, I want to look at the pictures. I want to look at the pictures, and he would study them so intently. This book I love maybe because of the title, being a Danny. I didn't know any other Dannys. And this Sid Hoff, you know, he did so many illustrations of kids' books in the early to mid-'60s when I was little. And, yeah. That style, that simplicity. So this is when I lived with my first stepfather, whose name was Steiger. So my name wasn't Gregory. For a while, it was Steiger. So that's me practicing my name. And I eventually lost that name and got a different name after that too. But yeah, just again, look at this simple color scheme where there's just one color basically sitting on top here, and the tone. These drawings look like they were colored in by a kid. You know, they have that feeling of like crayon drawings or colored pencils or something. Really simple, probably drawn with a brush. And the style really of a comic book or, you know, like a newspaper cartoon. Very accessible. And this book was just kind of bizarre story. And this, I always remember him eating ice cream. It was just so, the idea of having, I mean, I think I just loved ice cream, but that part of it, I just remember the idea of a dinosaur eating a little tiny popsicle. Really beautiful. So, Sid Hoff, Danny and the Dinosaur. You know, I grew up part of the time in England, in Australia, and various other places. My father lived in England, and he would periodically send me these annuals from these newspaper kind of magazine things that there were for kids. And this is one of them, Jack and Jill's Book of Games and Puzzles. And I sort of colored in parts of it. And I guess I kind of cut things out. Yeah, I cut a thing there. And this is, again, one of those books where I just remember it so much of it. So many things in here are the illustration style, the lettering, but just the individual images. And you can see I've obviously colored in a lot of it in this book. I'm surprised that I was okay with that. But yeah, this book had tricks. And then these kinds of really rich drawings. Again, single color. I mean, this is something I've done time and again, which is to do limited color, things like this, where you just, you know, you have, it's just red, but then there's heavier, you know, there's all different kinds of tones, but they're all in one color. And that's really inspired me. That's a book of games, but this annual, Beano's a, you know, in England it was like it's still around. It's like a kid's sort of magazine, I guess you would call it, like a weekly or something. And it had lots of different kinds of comics in it. So there would be some that were sort of like this that were kind of realistic. And then there were others that were just much more cartoony. And then there would also be some that looked like they were different characters, but they seemed to be drawn by the same people. But I remember like this style, this way of drawing nostrils. But this style, and these things were like politically really incorrect. I mean, these are like basically Native Americans, and they speak in like weird, unpleasant, sort of racist, basically. And these Bash Street kids were these kids that were also, in this case, they were also birds. And then there were the bears. So the bears, to me, were a lot like these Indians, Little Plum. The drawings are sort of similar style. But again, you notice here, like, this is just yellow, and this is just red. entire story would be like that. Lord Snooty. Yeah, so in a way, they're comics, but they're different styles. And for me, I think in particular, because I was this weird kid who wasn't really from anywhere, and I never really understood fully the culture of any of the places that I went to. And I would study these, like, to try and get information about, like, what kids were into, like, what were you supposed to think was funny and interesting, because I really was so clueless about most things. And these annuals were kind of like my sort of library, my dictionary, my roadmap. So you see like orange and blue. Yeah, it's funny looking at them now and realizing like how influential this way of doing color has been to me. This annual, you can see, is also falling apart. But here I have a rubber stamp that says Danny Steiger. Yeah, it was just this spread, I can just remember these drawings so clearly, even the way this car looked. And sometimes you'd read these and you couldn't really understand like it was like grown-up stuff really behind these stories, like what exactly was going on. But I just remember how cute these creatures were, how beautiful the colors are also. In Teddy and Cuddly dress up. Freddy Frog's Holiday. Just the fact that he had this little wooden car. It was made out of like boxes. There occasionally you'd get this sort of thing where it's an actual story. Yeah, I always wondered, like later on when I was an adult, I thought grown-ups made this stuff. Like what was that like, having this as a job? But as a kid, I was so invested in this, and you can see I would read them over and over and over again, and that's why they were falling apart, and a lot of them had drawings all over them and stuff. But these are really beautiful drawings. There's such different styles. Some of them, as I said, are very realistic. And this, I mean, these are beautiful little paintings. Slightly off register too, so it looks slightly out of focus. And it's a totally different style. This I remember so well. This turtle with this sweater that was too big. I don't know that. There's just little memories stick in my head. This is one of the biggest things in my small life was Rupert. So Rupert the bear there's not really a counterpart to it in America. People have compared it with like Dondi or something, but it's not. It's vaguely like Tintin, but no, not really either. But it's this ongoing story of this bear, and he lives in a world where his friends are all animals. So there's like his best friend is a badger, and there's his mother who's a bear, and his dad is a bear, but they have a dog. So there's that part of it that's strange. And then periodically there are humans. And the humans are, so there are these kind of, and this appears in the newspaper. I think it might still appear. I think was it the Daily Express or something? Anyway, it was, and each day there would be one of these things. Now, the thing about this is this story is told 3 different times on each page. So here you have Rupert ends his long journey, which is what this story is about. And then it would be in verse. They reach their camp against a hill to find that all is strangely still. The chief moves forward, then he asks, why aren't the women at their tasks? He finds each cabin neat and clean, but there is no one to be seen. And then it tells you the same story again, but in prose. The long journey ends at last at a hollow high in the hills. The horsemen dismount and Rupert is lifted down. Orders are shouted and the baggage unloaded. So it tells the whole story again, but I always remember the cadence of these little poems. And so, you could just get the gist of it from reading this, or if you've liked reading, you could read more. And, it was always like these stories of Rupert and it was like the Hardy Boys in a way, or there would be like crimes to solve. And, there he is with his friends. He had a friend who was, I think, a pug, one of his chums. And there's Rastus, the rat. So the thing about Rupert is my dad was really into Rupert. And he did this whole bunch of paintings of Rupert. I might have one still around, but he did these paintings of Rupert, but they were always sort of sinister. And it was always Rupert sort of doing something like looking at like blood on a wall or holding a stick that looked like he was going to beat somebody with. And when I was little, my father wanted me to be named Rupert when I was born. I was supposed to be named Rupert. How different my life would have been if I was named Rupert instead of Danny. My mother was like, no way, we're not naming him Rupert. It'd be like naming me Tintin, I guess. My life would have been different, I guess, if I was named Tintin. Yeah, it is a pug. Oh dear, it isn't working yet. The little pug sounds quite upset. At last he tumbles on the ground and gasps, the commons whirling round. And he also drove a little car. I loved people who drove little cars. A lot of these characters did. So Rupert, I had a lot of these Rupert books. There are Rupert cartoons and there's other kinds of things, but these original ones, they always had this painted cover and beautiful art. And in fact, my father once went and met the artist. There were several different artists because this series went on from the 30s, I think. And I think it's still around. But there was a guy named Ralph Bestall, I think it was the artist. I mean, and these end pieces, beautiful. Beautiful. Is it a watercolor? I think it might be. Yeah, Ralph Bestall. You see it says Bestall down there. So, a couple more. This book, Stories Children Love. This is a book, honestly, it must be from like the 30s. I don't even know anymore. It's got a lot of scribbling in it. And it belonged here, Nancy Steiger. It belonged to my stepfather's younger sister. And that's how I somehow inherited it. And look at these drawings. They're like very Art Deco. I don't even know. A lot of times they don't even have credit. Lois Lenski. But they have that style of like the 1920s. And again, these I just poured over and studied them. I didn't care that much about the story. I knew kind of most of these stories. This is Peter Pan and Dick Whittington and his cat. But just, again, these beautiful... I mean, it just... something about these little tiny spot illustrations that are just really moving to me. Yeah, it's all Lois Lenski. Lenska, maybe. Jack and the Beanstalk. And then this cover. I just remember studying this cover and like going, oh, that's Dick Whittington. Oh, or is that Puss in Boots? That's Dick Whittington. And, just trying to figure out like who the things were. And just the way this book was made too. Like it's kind of cloth bound, but then it had this thing stuck on, And these books smell a certain way. They just have that smell. So this is from 1922, 27, 32, and 33. So yeah, this book is almost 100 years old. And it's gotten a lot of use. A lot of pages are beaten up. And I'll end with this one, which is Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seuss's sleep book. I love Dr. Seuss, although I was troubled by some Dr. Seuss books as well, I'll admit. There's something about him, like Cat in the Hat. Cat in the Hat was just like so anarchic, so like he was like busted into these kids' houses and pushing them around, telling them what to do. And yeah, it kind of bothered me. I mean, Hop and Pop I quite liked. Green Eggs and Ham. There were just a lot of them. You know them all. Yertle the Turtle. It's one I studied quite extensively too. Yertle the Turtle was again like horrible. I mean, he's a fascist basically, dictator who kind of makes all the other turtles stack up so he can be higher and higher. Sounds familiar. But yeah, this book is it's so hilarious too. just all a book about sleep, that you would read to a kid and the kid would probably fall asleep. Just looking at these pictures of yawning animals makes you want to yawn. Again, limited palette. I love the fact that it's all blue with these yellow creatures and their red mouths. It's just really beautiful design. I mean, this whole book is basically teal, yellow, and red. It's so strange. It's so strange. I mean, this thing, I was just obsessed with this little crank and the way that this thing was designed so that you could thread the thing through it and that it looked like a door, and these staircases and these weird, I don't know, these creatures, the Hinklehorn honkers, who each had their own little Hinklehorn waiting for them to use the next day. This guy counting how many people fell asleep. Look how tired he looks too. He's counting them and marking them off. And it's sort of like a computer thing in a bubble with like a little doorway. I mean, as a kid, you just love studying things like this, studying them, really like trying to understand how they're put together, what the logic is. I'll show you. This I remember really vividly too. These creatures who would walk around with candles so that if they wake up while they're sleepwalking, they will be able to find their way home. And this is probably the thing I remember most vividly from this book. Maybe you do too. This creature, the Chippendale Mupp, who bit the end of his tail, and then he would go to sleep, and then when the pain had traveled the whole length of his tail, it would wake him up, and it was time to get up in the morning. Like that was his alarm clock. So hilarious, so ingenious. And these are like kids' jokes, sort of, but they're great for adults too. And again, limited palette, red, blue. Just so much cross-hatching in there. Simple, confident lines, clean storytelling, and just the use of language. I mean, Dr. Seuss, I don't need to tell you what a great writer he was and how hilarious in his use of words and the rhythms. The rhythms of his words are so singular and you just remember them. The news has come in from the district of Doft. The two oft are asleep, and they're sleeping aloft. And how are they able to sleep off the ground?
02 p.m.
Whoops, that's my clock. And how are they able to sleep off the ground? I'll tell you, I weighed one last week, and I found that an oft is so light, he weighs -1 pound. And this, the moose streaming of moose juice, and the goose streaming of goose juice. So good, so good. And that just is a beautiful image. I remember when I was working on I made this little animated film called The Artist Who Couldn't Draw. And I just remember this scene. I did a scene that was like this with the moon rising and this window, and you could see inside the one thing. And this blue scene was a yellow window. Good night. This book is to be read in bed. That was pleasant. I hope you enjoyed it too. So what books did you like when you were a kid? What memories do you have? Do you remember any of these? Do you have others that you liked? These things, they go into us, I always think about this this illustrator who I interviewed when I was working on it. We were working on a class called Illustration Nation. And she said that when she was little, she used to love to put on books on tape and just draw. And that now she's an adult and an illustrator, and that's her job, she puts on books on tape and she draws. And I just love that idea. I just love that we can go back to this time in our lives when we were innocent, but also endlessly curious and creative. And we were seeing the world for the first time. We were just so interested in how it worked and figuring out the parts of it, and so easily entertained in a way, but also always looking for more and always questioning. And you've all had that experience of you read a book with a kid and the kid is asking you so many questions about it. And I always think about that, to be an illustrator of children's books, which I've never done. I did some for my own son. I made a couple little things, but the idea that you're making something that might for the rest of their life be embedded in their heads, right? It's so incredible to think how you're making art, you're telling a story to all these little kids who are, their brains are sponges and they're just absorbing the feelings, and they have such positive associations with books, and they recognize that they're things that they can escape into their worlds. It's really, really powerful, and it's just a reminder that books and art and stories are just the bedrock of who we are, and we forget that. There we are, looking at gossip on Facebook or looking at clickbait news on our phones, and we forget the value and beauty of just curling up with a great book and studying the pictures and going on a vacation or an adventure or journey or epic trip in our heads. It's amazing. It's wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed seeing my library. Share some jewels from yours. Thanks again. Bye-bye.